friends, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us once again this week, and welcome to another Gnostic Lab for Practical Application. Today, we are going to dedicate our time to look within and find all those instances where our inner Pharisee comes out. This is very, very important because it is easy for all of us just to look around and to see those psychological aggregates that are brutal in nature. All of those that are crude, gross, the ones that express themselves in ways that are way less than edifying and way less than honorable. And we can find all those very easy. See, any one of us can look back in our day and say, yeah, I was really angry, I was fuming. We can see that very easy. We can look back in our day and see those instances in which we have been lured into those temptations, and before long, we are dedicating our attention into things that are very destructive. We can look at all those moments where we have been deliberately cynical, or we have been sarcastic. That's very easy to see. But the difficult aspects are those that are very subtle, the ones that are non-threatening. All of those psychological aggregates that we carry within that are very dangerous, but that they consistently go under our internal radar. And we need to learn to see these. We need to learn to find these. And as we observe our day, we will see that to one degree or another, as we reflect in the many difficult circumstances of our life, just as we may reflect in the many other enjoyable circumstances of the day, we will see that we tend to rest in some foundation that is made of many interesting considerations. These are self-considerations. And for example, we tend to rely on our social status. We tend to rely on our prestige. And every one of us will rely in our social status and in our prestige to different degrees. There may be some of us who are doctors, and we love it when people address us as doctor. And we love it when people recognize us as being somebody successful with a very fruitful practice. But so what? There are many of us who may love the fact that they may be recognized as erudites or intellectuals because of their PhDs and their studies and the way that they express themselves and how they share their ideas. And so what? See, but those are some extremes. There can also be some of us who may see ourselves as a mechanic, as an automotive technician. And yet, we would create a false foundation where we give ourselves some degree of prestige because of how good we are. The same thing happens. Could be a Gnostic missionary, a Gnostic instructor. And look at other instructors and even think, I can give better lectures than that. You see? I can be more profound in what can be shared than them. None of us are exempt from these internal aspects. And the fact is that we may create all of this false foundation made of self-considerations and self-definitions and this artifices that create this fake image. However, we at the end of the day all depend on each other, regardless of our many prides. It doesn't matter if you are a doctor or if you were a teacher, or if you are a butcher, or if you are a janitor. The moment that we start creating those self considerations that invite us to compare ourselves with others, and that somehow we're constantly either doing better than others in those mental images, or we are falling ourselves as victims and seeing us as less than others. In either the case, that is always a problem. But let's speak a little different tonight. And rather than speaking of a problem, let's speak in terms of a conflict. And let's not say conflict as in what many of us would immediately see, that is a condition where we have some kind of quarrel or argument or disgust. Let's move beyond that definition. And let's consider conflict from the perspective of a scientist, of a good physicist, where they would see conflict not as a problem and an inconvenience, but as something that is obstructing the system to deliver the result that it is intended to. Okay? So if we look at this as a conflict, as an obstacle that is impairing our consciousness to operate in one way or another, then we can understand these things a little better. Because those egos that we have that are standing on this false foundation that we have created, they all create those conflicts. They all become an impediment for the consciousness to become an instrument of the innermost. And when those egos are present, then the innermost cannot make use of our physicality to express itself. It cannot make use of our personality to interact with the environment. And it certainly cannot make use, of our mind, of our emotions, of our actions, of our creative impulses to generate anything. Because all of that is already captured by the ego itself. You see, all of these aggregates that we carry within, that are constantly inviting of all of these comparisons, they are always underestimating everyone else. They always invite us to feel that we are somehow better, superior, better skilled, more eloquent, etc. They convince us that to some degree we are just this far away from perfection, and that everyone else is just everyone else. And in our ways of thinking, our thinking process is so abnormal that even though these thoughts would manifest themselves many times during the day, we don't think twice about it. We just see those thoughts pass, and we many times become identified with the circumstances. We forget to make that effort to raise the consciousness to the level of our circumstances. We just leave the consciousness out there, and we forget about it, and we become fascinated, and we engage in all of these arguments and these gives and takes, and we become insulting and sarcastic and petulant and all of these things. So for us, it is of good value to go and look at some of the writings of the Apostle Luke. And Luke is of particular preference for this specific teaching, because Luke teaches us about the doctrine of the mind. Every time that you see the images of the Apostle Luke, Matthew, Mark, and John, you will see that there are specific animals accompanying them all the time. An eagle, a fish, oxen. You will see that these animals are symbols of the elements of nature: air, water, earth, fire. And Luke gives us some of this doctrine that has to do with the mind, particularly with how wise we must become working in the transformation of our impressions. This story that we have here comes from chapter 18, and here he quotes the great master Yeshua, Jesus, sharing this parable, and the parable reads, "Two men went up into the temple to pray, the one a Pharisee, the other a publican. The Pharisee stood and prayed thus with himself, God, I thank thee that I am not as other men are, extortioners, unjust, adulterers, or even as this publican. I fast twice in the week. I give tithes of all that I possess. And the publican, standing afar off, would not lift up so much as his eyes unto heaven, but smote upon his breast, saying, God be merciful to me, a sinner. I tell you, this man went down to his house justified rather than the other. For every one that exalted himself shall be abased, and he that humbleth himself shall be exalted." The great Master Jesus, in one of his teachings, he prays and says, Father, teach me how to be humble. And once I learn that, then teach me once again how to be humble as you are. As we observe our dynamics during the day, we have to start by looking at things a little different, particularly from the perspective of acknowledging our nothingness. It really doesn't matter the house that we may have, the car that we may drive. It really does not matter how much exists in the 401k. Certainly does not matter how much there is in your credit card line. None of that is of any relevance. Because if something were to happen today that crumbled all of these other systems that we have come to set our false foundation upon, all of these other institutions and groups and systems where we have founded our social status and our prestige, then what would become of us? What would we be? Certainly not any different than many of those who try to escape their countries for whatever reason, and who find themselves performing the most humble jobs, regardless of them having titles of being lawyers and doctors, of them being certified or graduated as engineers or whatever job they used to have. You see, we have to acknowledge our nothingness. We have to start realizing that there is really not much of us that is truly valuable and free and awakened today. That everything that is pure and divine in us, most of it, has already been compromised, and that it remains trapped within our own inhumanities. For as long as we continue carrying forth this thinking that is constantly inviting of a comparison, those thoughts and those internal impulses that are always inviting into the more, thinking that I am more honest than somebody else, or thinking that we know more than someone else on whatever topic, or thinking that we are more virtuous, or that we are richer, or that we are more skilled, it's going to be very difficult for us to make any kind of internal change. As we go back and we revisit our day, we need to find within ourselves our inner Pharisee. Let's remember that the Pharisee characterizes itself for looking honest, perfect, poised, clean, all of that on the outside. But on the inside, we find the complete opposite. On the outside, it is very presentable, and on the inside, it is a real mess. If at any point in your day you find yourself looking at someone, and even without uttering a word within the realm of the mind, you perceive that message that says, I am richer than them, that's something worthy of watching. If at any moment you are exchanging some of the stuff that you have learned here or that you have learned there, and you're sharing it with someone else, whether it has to do with these studies or whether it has to do with school or anything whatsoever, and you find yourself making a comparison thinking, my school is better than that one, or my teacher, or my whatever, it sounds so much better than, then we need to look into those thoughts. We need to look into those emotions, and we certainly need to look into those actions. But not only when that is happening, we also have to realize that if at any point we are saying, today I feel so great because today I helped, we have to look into that as well. Today I feel so good and I feel so full of joy because today I served. We have to look into that. There's a story of a Chinese master that even as a child, he always wanted to be a monk. And one day, as he was outside with his mother was tending the garden, and two wandering monks showed up, and they paid reverence to the woman as she was tending to her garden, and they politely asked if she had anything for them to eat. She very graciously stood up. She invited them into the house, and she prepared a meal for them, and she fed them. At the time that they were leaving, one of them was getting ready to say thank you. She raised her hand. She said, no. And the monks, Zen Buddhist monks, they brought their hands together. They paid a reverence to the woman. They turned around and they walked away. The child looked at his mother and said, this is outrageous. You just stopped working out in the garden and you cooked the meal and you fed them. And they did not even say thank you. The mother said, that's why I said no. Said it doesn't matter. They should have insisted because they needed to express their gratefulness. And the mother said, if I had allowed them to give me thanks, and I had accepted those thanks, then that means that that the meal that I gave them, the sacrifice that I exercised, was not selfless. I would have exchanged that sacrifice for a thank you, and we must learn to be selfless, to give unto others without expecting anything in return. So if at any point we feel, I feel good because today I helped, or I feel good because there was somebody in need and I intervened, we also have to look into that. But there's still more. If at any point we are comparing ourselves like the Pharisee in the story, and we are saying, I am not like that man who is always lying. I am not like that man who is always insulting, always deceiving, you see? If we're a woman and we're saying, I am not like her. Look how she dresses. Look how she is so provocative. I'm not like that. Those are all instances that we really need to look within. Every time that we are exercising a comparison, we have to remember the teaching of Samael, because he says, comparisons are abysmal. Every time that we compare, we are harming the thing that is being compared to the thing that it is being compared to. Every time that our mind is exercising one of those comparisons, every time that one of those comparisons includes us against someone else, that is a clear indication that there is an inner Pharisee that we really have to be paying attention to. And when we do that, then let's observe how we are thinking at those moments, how we are feeling, how we are acting. Let's see what circumstances lead us into that particular moment. And when we do that, as we grasp, apprehend that degree of comprehension, let's also make sure that we're capturing the lesson. Because after all, that is what makes us different from the animals. We have the ability to exercise concept. And the whole purpose of us creating concept, making use of it, is so that we can integrate the lesson learned into the consciousness. We know that we have truly integrated the lesson when the event repeats itself. And then we can say, I know what this is going to be. Then we can say, I can see how things are going to unfold. And then we do not give our feet into the slippery slopes. Then we do not allow ourselves to be lured by those psychological aggregates that are so subtle that will just enchant us and lure us into that temptation. As we learn the lesson, as we start seeing these indicators and we just don't give ourselves into the same mistakes, we start stealing the fire away from our ego. We start exercising a little increment in the degree of mastery. And as we do that, we slowly start noticing that our consciousness starts becoming more awake. So let's observe how we are thinking, how we are feeling, how we are acting. Let's observe those thoughts without reacting to them. Let's just contemplate them. And as we do that, let's see the circumstances that lead into those particular events. And let's take the lesson. And as we have that, knowing that these defects only add into our suffering, invoke of the power of your Divine Mother and ask of her to eliminate it. She will. Let's go ahead and let's work a little bit tonight by looking for that inner Pharisee. So let's go ahead and start by resting our feet flat on the ground. As they are flat on the floor, just allow your hands to rest comfortably on your thighs. And let's close our eyes so that we are not distracted with any of the external impressions. Let's take a deep breath in 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2. Let's make ourselves aware of all the sensations in our physical body. Sensations in our feet, in our legs, in our back. Sensations in our skin. Let's make ourselves aware just for a second of what we are perceiving through our senses. Our hearing, our sense of taste, our sense of touch, our sense of smell. And even though our eyes may be closed, as you relax your eyes, it is likely that you may perceive some color. Maybe blue or red, or maybe yellow or black. And with this very small increased level of awareness, let's go ahead and let's project the pulsations of our heart to the tip of our nose. We can see that this happens very naturally, without any effort. As we feel those pulsations on the tip of our nose, knowing that this is the instrument that we use just to route that airstream directly into our body, we keep in mind that we must transform within our body the impression of the air itself. Through the air we receive that substance called prana that nourishes our ethereal body, that nourishes our physicality. And we're certainly grateful for the opportunity of enjoying of an additional breath. And there are so many today who struggle to breathe. And with that, we transition those pulsations from the tip of our nose onto our right ear. This in a way reminds us of the things that we share, the things that we say. must remain present so that we can avoid saying things that may not be honorable, that may not satisfy the concepts of kindness and compassion. And in gratitude for this opportunity to remember that, and with that very little fraction of increased awareness, we transition all pulsations from our right ear onto our right hand. And as we feel that gentle beating of our heart in our right hand, our right hand reminds us that everything that we offer others not only should be honorable, it should be edifying and essentially dignifying. Our emotions, our actions, our thoughts, as they become projected, we should strive for them to be a gift of love. As there is already plenty of discord, plenty of conflict in the world that we live. And in gratefulness for this reminder, we transition those pulsations from our right hand onto our right foot. And as we feel those gentle pulsations around our toes and the ball of our foot, our right foot reminds us that we should live a life in right action, in right thought, in right sentiment. We then allow those pulsations from our right foot to transition into our left foot. And different than the right side, that is the side that offers and projects, the left side is the one that receives. Our left foot reminds us that as we embark ourselves in our path of life, it should be in a direction where we can extract the symbols and the teachings and the greater experiential knowledge that comes from not living life like an end in itself, but as a path to transformation. We must remember that in this path we will come across difficult moments and difficult temptations, and that is okay. Because after all, what is life without problems? How could metals be tested if it is not by fire? And in gratitude with that reminder, we transition those pulsations from our left foot onto our left hand. As we experience those gentle palpitations in our left hand, we are reminded that at any given moment we are always there to receive. Those actions that we may consider as inferior from others. Actions that we may consider negative. Actions that under many circumstances we would just reject. But we must remember that all those things that we judge in others, all of those things that we criticize in others are nothing more than a reflection of aspects of us that exist hidden deep within our own psyche. And that rather than fight that, we are better off observing and looking in our life and seeing, where is it that I am like that? Because that leads to discovery. And thus we must be grateful for many of those difficult experiences that we receive in life. And in happiness from knowing this, we allow those palpitations to then move from our left hand onto our left ear. And as we feel the gentle beating of our heart in our left ear, we are reminded that we must be very cautious on what we give our ears to. Whether it is the chatter among neighbors or the news or what we see in videos or through our social media, everything is important. We must be watchful about which things we deliberately feed the mind. And let's transition then those gentle heartbeats from our left ear back into the tip of our nose. And as we once again become aware of the sensations in our body, we can see that our body is inundated by a very gentle vibration that comes from this state of relaxation. Together we can say, Divine Father, Father of mine, you who are my true being, you who are my eternal God, we ask of you, we beg of you with our soul and our heart, you awaken in us the faculties of imagination, of inspiration and intuition. Allow us to receive that principle of spontaneity, that together with those faculties, we can then see our inner Pharisee, so that way we are not distracted with the appearance of things, but that we can actually perceive the thing itself. So that we can understand the significance and the reason of the things without having to compare and rely on the inferior logic of our mind. So that we can extract the spiritual reality of what we experience. We ask of this in your holy name. So be it. Now let's start our exercise of retrospection. Let's begin from this moment and backwards, all throughout your day, till the moment that you woke up. And let's look for those moments where we were comparing ourselves to others, our circumstances to others, our current condition to others, comparing the defects that we think that we don't have to the ones that we see in others. And let's contemplate. It is okay for you to allow yourself to walk into that transition state between the vigil state and the sleep state. is the most auspicious condition to achieve that perfect balance between the body going to sleep and remaining awake. Embrace that principle of spontaneity and contemplate with no judgments, with no justifications. Simply contemplate. Observe your thoughts and see how you became reasonable, accepting, that you would justify your actions. And at the same time, observe how your thinking pattern influences your emotions. And also observe the actions that you took, what resulted out of all that. To take the lesson, it is important that we reconcile this. To reconcile if your event emerged because of the words of another. We must remember that we cannot be placing objections. We need to comprehend our objections. Somebody is demanding to have the reason. Well, our job is to let them have it and allow time to determine who has the reason itself. And that way we don't create resistance. If our event sprung forward because of the actions of others, we must see all those instances in which we have done the same thing, but perhaps at a different degree of intensity. And with this level of understanding, we can always invoke of our Divine Mother in our own words, in your own words. Ask of her to eliminate that aspect of those defects that you have comprehended. Divine Mother, we give you infinite thanks for the help that you give us. Divine Father, we give you infinite thanks for the opportunity to be able to perceive, to see, comprehend, to grasp the spiritual reality of things without having to go down the path of mental processes and comparisons. Very well, so let's take a deep breath in 1. And as we exhale in 2, just wiggle your toes and your fingers and open your eyes. Let's come back into this present moment. So dear friends, this has been our practice tonight on finding our internal Pharisee. We hope that this has been a very useful and fruitful practice for you. And we invite you to put it into use as part of your blue time. So thank you very much for joining us this evening. It's always great having you here. May all beings be happy.